Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Another week in Scottish politics for us to discuss, dissect and debate. And as you can see, the panel's all here ready to go. The usual suspects, Eva, Lloyd, Phil and Allan, welcome. And thank you for being here. I'd like to start, Eva, right at the beginning. I mentioned before my respect for Martin Geisler, who seems a fair and good journalist. And another one is Colin Mackay, and he was interviewing John Swinney again this week. And
the plan seems to fail to unite your own party, let alone the independence movement.
I think it's important that we are in a position to see Scotland's democratic right to decide our future honoured by the choices of the people of Scotland. And I want to make sure Scotland can not only have that choice about our future, but also that we can deliver an independent Scotland as a consequence. That's why the plan that I'm setting out, which relies upon the precedent of 2011, when the SNP won a majority in the Scottish Parliament, and we had a referendum that enabled us to choose our future. Now that, to me, is the route by which we will be able to secure a choice about Scotland's future, and people in Scotland have got to make it a priority at this forthcoming election.
Is the alternative proposal of taking all the pro-Indy votes from all the parties on the list worth even considering? Is it something that you should at least be considering debating at your conference?
Well, I don't agree with it, and I don't think it will work.
Should you be open to debate on it?
That's for my party's conference committee to consider.
But you can have an opinion on it.
Well, it'll be up to the conference committee to decide.
Would you be willing to debate that with them at conference?
Of course I would be. I'm a Democrat. I lead a democratic political party, and I've debated many important choices with my party over time. But I don't think it'll work, because we had that in 2016 and 2021, and it didn't succeed.
We didn't have exactly what they were proposing.
Well, but it didn't break the logjam. And the issue that I come back to is the importance of having a route that results in Scotland becoming independent. And this is a crucial point. If Scotland is to become independent, there has to be domestic and international legitimacy for an independent Scotland. Now, we had that in 2014 because all the rules were agreed. Both sides would accept the outcome of a referendum. That would not be the case with the proposal being advanced, and that's why I don't think it would work.
So you want an SNP majority of seats like you had in 2011, which you think would guarantee it. But in her book, Nicola Sturgeon says of that 2011 majority of the SNP, it is quite likely that will never happen again. She says your plan's not going to happen.
It depends what the people of Scotland think about it, and that's the most important.
She doesn't think it's going to happen again.
The most important thing is the people of Scotland have it within their hands and their choice to ensure that that's the outcome that can be achieved, and that's what I'm going to go into the election.
She doesn't think it's likely.
Well, I'm going to rely upon the people of Scotland to determine.
Your support's at 34%. You're nowhere near it. You're nowhere near where you were in 2011.
Well, we're in a far stronger position than we were in advance of the 2011 election today than we were then. So we've got stronger foundations, and we've got a big picture to put to the people of Scotland, which is that our prospects as a country, the life chances of people in this country can be transformed by independence. We can have an energy system that works in the interest of the people of Scotland with independence, and that's the message that people in Scotland have got to hear to be confident and optimistic about the future and to make independence a priority.
Have you read Nicola Sturgeon?
I don't know where to start with this one, Eva. The question is, I've never seen anyone so deluded, no one so head in the sand, not willing to face up to reality, even when the blessed Nicola has said that majority is unlikely ever to happen again. He keeps ploughing on.
Well, congratulations to Colin Mackay, a good Clackmannanshire lad getting wired in there. More of this, please, regularly and often. You saw how rattled John got there when he kept talking about his party and his personal view. But he has to allude to democracy and Scotland's democratic right. And it's imposing something that is almost like enforcement on independent supporters if you say that the only route to independence is by voting SNP, when you know that that is fundamentally and completely wrong. What happened in 2011 happened as the result of Alex Salmond's efforts over a long period of time, where he had introduced competent government and people became confident and there was self-belief and hope. But the self-belief was well-founded. There were strong foundations then because Alec had begun to transform Scotland, and the population, even those who had started off as no's, who were dyed-in-the-wool unionists that came around to supporting the SNP and then supported independence, did so because they could see that there was competence, there was self-belief, there was ability, there was experience, there was determination, and Alec's foundations were solid. John Swinney's current foundations are far, far from being solid, and we know this for a multitude of reasons, which I'm sure we'll come to in due course. But at this stage, John's entire premise just now is that the SNP is good for Scotland. At least half of the population disagree. It's likely that at most 30-odd% will vote SNP if they bother to come out, because we see voter apathy in every local authority by-election as it is just now, and we saw it in the last Holyrood by-election in Hamilton. So what you have here is John again putting and pitting party before country, party against country, and that's nothing other than self-interest. But it's why Liberate Scotland exists, because what we know is that in 2015 at the general election for Westminster, 2016 for Holyrood, 2017 and 19 for Westminster, and 2021 for Holyrood, the SNP and independent supporting MPs, MSPs votes were in the majority. That's not in doubt. The only thing that's in doubt is the route to independence. And John's route to independence is the route that, to use his words, will not work, because he reinstates the Oliver Twist beg and bowl routine, where he says, in essence, when we've got a majority of SNP MSPs, we will ask Westminster to grant us a Section 30. He's playing by Westminster rules yet again. And I, for one, am fed up hearing it, and I'm fed up seeing it, and I'm fed up saying it. And every time John Swinney comes on the telly, he says the same bloody thing, and people are scunnered and sick to the back teeth of being lied to and led up a garden path that is a route to nowhere, when it's a route to independence that we desperately need. And the route is indeed, the key to that is indeed having a majority of independent supporting MSPs of all party or of no party, and a majority of votes, not just in individual constituencies where we should have one independent supporting candidate per constituency, but on the list where we should be having an organised, managed vote, so that there is what Alex Salmond and Colette Walker referred to as a supermajority. Others this week have spoken about the small folk taking over again. That's what needs to happen, because the likes of John Swinney are completely and utterly out of touch with the people of Scotland's motivation and desires, and the motivations and desires of the people of the movement. His own party membership makes that plain day in and day out. And the rest of us are working in Liberate Scotland and elsewhere constantly to persuade people around to our way of thinking, which is simply stated, country before party and independence, nothing less.
Hear, hear. And the only reason there will be two candidates, independent candidates in any seat, is because the SNP do not want to talk, they do not want to unite, they do not want to be part of the game. So if there's any split or talks of split, that lies with the SNP, who refuse to talk to the independence movement. One of the telling things, Lloyd, in his interview there, is he was, I'm a Democrat and I will debate anything. They've already knocked back the motion that was put in by the 43 branches. But this is now, he said his conference committee will decide if the amendment's accepted. Therein, folks, lies the problem. If the conference committee, now we know, coming from a party, we've all been in parties, that conference committee is loaded. That's going to be the biggest hurdle for the rebels, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. The constitution of the party has been mutilated to such a degree that in real terms, the leadership, the current elected national executive, have total and complete control over the content of the conference in every possible way. But the absurdity of what John says is, and he fails to understand, because the current NSNP leadership cannot speak about the man whose name must not be mentioned, namely Alex Salmond. Alex Salmond had run a government that had achieved, a minority government that had achieved, a government that operated in a professional manner, did not institute policy which was opposed by the majority of the people of the country, and that gave confidence to a huge number of people leading into that election in 2011. Now, it cannot be said in any way whatsoever that we have had competent government by the Scottish National Party under any of the three previous First Ministers, John included. What we have is we have division amongst the people, division indeed within his own party. But as Eva says, if you want to achieve, and you genuinely want to achieve independence, then it is foolish at best, if not utterly and completely disruptive and self-centered, not to count every pro-independence vote. And if you accept that theory, then what you do is you enter into an election on the basis that all pro-independence votes will count. But that would require the current leadership of the Scottish National Party to enter into dialogue with the other elements of the national movement, of the pro-independence movement. And I know, and I think we all know, and I think the audience know as well, they are afeard of doing that, because they may have to face some harsh realities and accept that they have made mistakes, huge mistakes over the past 10 years. But what they also don't understand, and this is the central problem, is people want to talk to them to come to an arrangement that will lead the country to independence. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be about debates about who did what, when, and who. The issue is the future of the country on behalf of the people. Now, if they are afeard of actually entering into dialogue of any kind whatsoever with people who they think are currently critical of them, then wherein lies John's democracy that he keeps talking about, his democratic intellect? There is no democratic intellect involved whatsoever if you will not debate with those who are on your side on the central principle, which is independence, nothing less. Independence, nothing more. Now, if you look at, say, and we'll get onto it later, but the local government by-election in Renfrewshire this week is effectively disastrous for the SNP for two reasons. We'll get onto that later. But another very important issue that should be ringing in the minds of all members of the Scottish National Party and all members of the movement is, if John thinks he can win an election next year when his party is currently sitting with a £500,000 deficit, no money to fight the election because you don't have the beneficence of those who won the national lottery, who donated huge amounts to the Yes Movement and the party. You do not have the money that came from various foundations that gave the SNP the power with which to address elections and indeed the independence referendum in 2014. This is a party with a falling membership, less than 50,000 now, we believe, from a high of 125,000 only 5-6 years ago. Now, how by any logistical concept can you genuinely sit and say to your conference, we will win next year's election when you're on 32% in the polls, you have £500,000 worth of debt and no money to fight the election, and you have effectively rejected the hands of friendship and support that are coming from the broader independence movement? It's a nonsense. And it shows again, as I said, John may claim to be a Democrat, but in real terms, what is going on here is there's an intellectual failure to recognize the realities of the situation that he's in. And I think that's why When faced by the questions from Colin Mackay, he became so rattled, because this current SNP leadership, since the very day that Nicola Sturgeon took over and Humza Yousaf followed him up and John followed on, there is no rigour within the party. Nobody says, but hold on, wait a minute. Explain to me how that is a reality. No one. Here we have the third emperor with no clothes.
Mm-hmm. Have I? Oh, I lost you. I thought I'd lost you there. On that, Phil, I just want to say that the rebels, as they're being referred to, are set the date in their new plan. They want to see every vote counting on the list as one for independence, and it should be a mass. And if we have a 50% plus one of the vote, then we should be demanding independence and starting negotiations. And they figure they could do it in a year. The great Alex Salmon thought it might take 18 months. I don't mind if it takes a bit longer, but the key part of this, Phil, is that the every vote should be counted. But will this plan get through?
No, no, it won't. You could read between the lines. John Swinney says, "Well, I'll leave it to the committee." Who is that committee? See, you just find out who that committee is. You know they're going to be stalwarts, and they're going to do exactly what they're told, and they're definitely not going to risk outing their snouts from the trough. There's no chance they're going to take a pop at a title when that's not their objective. The objective of the leadership of the SNP is to remain a devolved part of the British government, and that's what they are. Because that's who they are. That's what they are. These rebels, we're all rebels. We've all rebelled. You know, we were all part of this amazing cause and that phenomenal effort that was 2014, but the SNP won't even talk to their own people, never mind the independence cause. They don't even relate to the over 50% majority of Scots, and within that majority of Scots, the SNP representation continues to drop by significant numbers. It's over 20. They do not relate to the people of Scotland, and as Eva rightly said, I was one of the 56 MPs that went down in 2015 of 59, and we achieved nothing. We failed, and we laughed at the feeble 50. But the objective is to free Scotland. I went there believing, genuinely believing, giving up like a great many people at Nicola, like Philippa Whitford, like Joanna Cherry. All of us had come from very, very good jobs to take less money to do what was right for Scotland. These people have the completely other way around. The chancers, the ineptitude of the Scottish cabinet currently, they're full of people who are troffers and career politicians. They won't get a real job outside of politics. So it's all smoke and mirrors. And enthused voters, John said he'd enthused voters. Is that right, John? You're a history man. He says the SNPs deliver on issues that matter to the Scottish people. The stronger foundations that Eva alluded to, not anymore. They were laid by real independentistas like Salmond, who John helped stitch up with a redaction paintbrush, not even a pen. Democracy, what democracy? The members no longer have a say, as I've said, on party policy since their vote was removed from conference by the SNP leadership, primarily Angus Robertson. So no, you're not enthusing the Scots, John. The majority of Scots want independence, nothing less. That's what Liberate Scotland want to do. That's what all the other parties that are aligned and see that unification is the way forward, including these so-called rebels within the SNP. That's what they're rebelling about. They know that this is a nonsense plan. And what John, you simply continue to be the big council arm of the UK government. And by continuing to divide the independence cause by firstly walking away from independence 11 years ago when Sturgeon took over, then a whole list of issues that did nothing to enhance the cause. Fighting for trans rights ahead of independence, failing to even to talk to the independence supporters, and failing to regenerate the Yes movement. The COVID show, it was all about promoting Nicola. Did she come over well? Yes. Yes, but she's a very good orator. But what did it achieve? Fighting Brexit instead of cashing in on the British chaos. You're not reducing the number of folks in poverty, John. The drug death numbers continue to be a disgrace, and thereby keeping the focus of the Scottish people away from how we actually gain independence. This smoke and mirrors has got to stop. I mean, I mean, what else has Nicola come out? Why that? She came out as maybe being binary, maybe not. Well, glad you cleared that one up, Nicola. And it's all about her again with her book launch, which is full of lies. And John's a big part of that. John's a big part of that network that keeps us away from independence. Watch Jeff Aberdeen talk on this. And as soon as the case is started against those who stitched up Alex, I, for one, which includes the cabinet as it stands, this sugary cabinet, then I, for one, will be donating to see justice done. We've said for some time what is required to rip the quislings out of the heart of the SNP so we can stop this masquerade of the SNP seeking independence when we know they're only interested in continuing their own careers. For me, the snouts in the trough, as devolutionists, that's what they are. The lies need to stop, John. The compromised must be outed and the cause reignited with the spirit we had in the Yes movement lead up to 2014. Swinney and co are playing for the union side, the opposite side of what the Scottish people want and what the majority of us know is best for us. Independence, nothing less.
Indeed it is. Techie, I'm having some problems here. Techie, can you stick up that second video for me, please?
John Swinney has led the SNP to their worst ever election, or Scottish Parliament election result in 2003. And last year, their biggest losses in a Westminster election. They lost the Hamilton by-election just a few months ago. Yet the polls suggest that the SNP could still be the biggest party in the next Parliament.
It doesn't sound very good when you put it all like that, does it? But in saying that, if you're looking at the polls, the SNP is largely projected to still be the largest party in Holyrood at the next Parliament election next year. That being said, on reduced numbers, so potentially not as many seats as they have just now. So when John Swinney's discussing independence and looking at majority of SNP seats, for example, that may be quite tricky to get. That's still a long way off for the party. But
I mean, Nicola Sturgeon says in her book it's just not going to happen again.
Exactly. The Parliament is designed to not have a party winning so many seats. What happened back then, arithmetically, shouldn't have happened. So to do that again next year is probably unlikely. But he needs to sort of try, Johnson needs to try and look at how he manages to keep this momentum going of maintaining as being the biggest party. That's the challenge from now.
I love that. I thought she was being very fair, Allan, when she said getting a majority of might be a bit tricky. A bit tricky. I mean, if that's an understatement of the century.
Yeah, I mean, if John's going to be honest about 2011, he's going to have to tell us which constituency seats he's going to sacrifice, because he needs to lose the constituency seats in order to get the less seats which Alec had to take us over the line. It's as simple as that's how the D'Hondt system works. That's why Liberate Scotland's approach is a lot better, because we are standing people on the constituencies. We're not going to have nearly the same amount of MSPs winning the constituencies as what the SNP have. So it doesn't affect our list vote quite so much. We still have chances of getting people elected on the list as well. That's why Liberate Scotland 1, Liberate Scotland 2 will work in the Scottish Parliament next year. But, I mean, John Swinney just believes that the SNP is this wonderful thing. That's the only transport that will get us to independence. The passengers of the Titanic thought that was the only ship that would get them over to America. It sunk, just like what the SNP are doing just now. They are sinking. And the Yes movement are drowning with them. We've got to start looking at the facts and look how the D'Hondt system works. It's not there just to put bums on seats. It's there to ensure no party can get a majority. Alex Salmond fluked it, and Alex Salmond was the first person to admit that he fluked it. You cannot campaign to get a majority in the Scottish Parliament. The voting system just doesn't allow that. So what we have to do is get the party of independence, the whole lot of them, together and start working out a proper strategy, so we don't have people duplicated on constituencies and on the list. So as we utilise the entire Yes movement, so their vote is going for the one party, the one candidate. So as we make sure that we have all the votes counting within the Scottish Parliament elections. And if we do that, we will wipe out the Unionists from that Parliament. And we will have the power within that Parliament to take on Westminster. Because not only will we have bums on seats to take a majority, we will have backbones in MSPs that will stand up and say, this far, no further, and start pushing back and saying to Westminster, you believe you're in charge here? Wrong. It is the Scottish people who are sovereign in Scotland, and we will make sure their voices are heard loud and clear. Now, either get around a negotiating table or UDI will be called and we will go immediately to the United Nations for recognition. That's what we've got to do. No more pussyfooting around. I mean, John has been digging a hole, an escape hole, to try and get us freedom. This tunnel he's been digging, unfortunately, has been through water. He's getting nowhere, and he's not learning his faults. You cannot keep doing the same thing that fails. If it fails once, fails twice, fails 3 times, it's going to fail every other time, John. So come on, start putting the country before the party. And on the issue about the motion to conference, the leadership have played a flanker on that one, because it doesn't matter whether the conference committee is packed with leadership faithfuls. The rules of the conference committee are quite clear. John Swinney got his motion in first, so therefore you cannot have a motion that contradicts that at the same conference, because you would have two motions competing with one another. But also, within the motion that's went forward, you cannot produce an amendment to that to that motion, if it totally changes the meaning of the motion. And that the amendment that they're proposing would, because it would be more or less their motion put into his amendment and changing John Swinney's totally and getting their actual motion put forward. So it will be rejected. But more on top of that, in order to make real changes within the SNP, it's not just motions to conference you need to do, it's amendments to the Constitution. The Constitution is the ruling document of any organisation. And within the SNP's Constitution, it states quite clearly, elected members are not bound by decisions of conference. It also says elected members can make policy. So regardless of what policies you put through at conference, the elected members and the leadership can change them anytime they want. And that is why political parties are failing. And they're failing not just their memberships, but the citizens of this country. Liberate Scotland do not have a conference committee. Our policies are very, very clear. It is independence, nothing less, nothing more. Any candidate stands under independence at Liberate Scotland who win their seat will be seeking views of their constituents on which way they vote on motions in Parliament. What elected members are supposed to do. They are not supposed to go and push their own agendas within Parliament. But the only policy every single member of Liberate Scotland will be bound to is independence for Scotland.
Yeah, independence, nothing else, independence, nothing less. I think the best that the Rebels could hope for would probably be a remit back on the motion. And when that happens, it's too late to do anything about it when the spring conference comes round. So that's the best they can hope for. I hope to be proved wrong. I hope we're all proved wrong here and that sense prevails. But Eva, here's the thing. John's big plan now, this is personal for me because we've alluded to it. The by-election, now I know this area like the back of my hand, Barrhead, Leverside and Uplamore, where the Labour Party, who down south, Eva, are struggling to get 15-20%, are up at 41.9, albeit low turnout. I know all these caveats, but the SNP have dropped. Now, I remember, Eva, when we got rid of Jim Murphy in 2015. And I remember being at the count. And I remember when those boxes for that ward come out, and they were piled high for the SNP, piled high. And I saw a photograph during the week of the people out working in that by-election for the SNP. And they were mainly from Eastwood. There was hardly anyone from Barrhead there. There was a councillor and the MSP who used to be a Barrhead boy but now lives in Houston in a big fancy house. Before that, he didn't have a pot to piss in before he became an MSP, but that's another story. But the point is, I left. We had 29 people for leafleting. We had 10 canvassers. We had another 20 that could do street stalls, etc. They've got no feet on the ground. They've got no possibility. And at 29%, they ain't going to win at Holyrood, let alone win independence for us. They've got to change direction, Eva.
This is reminiscent of Animal Farm, isn't it? And it's reminiscent of that phrase, "Kent your father," or "I kent you when the snotters were tripping you," quite frankly. Brutal but true. Because the SNP leadership and their elected representatives, with a few exceptions, most of them have become completely out of touch, as I said earlier. And I'll give you an instance. It's no secret that I intend to take Keith Brown's seat off him next year. The constituency is Clackmannanshire and Dunblane, but it includes Bridge of Allan. And you'll have seen during the week, there were reports that Dunblane and Bridge of Allan are the best places in Scotland to live. I'm damn sure they are. But the other report was about Alloa. And Alloa is apparently, and I don't agree with this, but it's been reported as being the most depressing part of the UK. Now, it isn't. There are a lot of nice aspects to Alloa, but it is still in places pretty depressing. Keith Brown and the SNP are responsible for that. Because don't forget, Nicola Sturgeon didn't do what she did all by herself. She had a team round about her who silenced dissent, who promoted her position, and who constantly reminded those doubters within the party over a long period of time, Nicola's on it. Nicola's got a secret plan. So the people that are in leadership now, including John Swinney, of course, at the forefront, are those who prolonged and promulgated Sturgeon's absolute lack of competence throughout COVID, before COVID, and after COVID. They enabled her to lie. They enabled her to launch a ship, that a ferry that had its windows painted on. Well, the people of Scotland's eyes and ears aren't painted on. And what we can see is indeed that those who were elected, I exclude Phil and certain others from this, but many of those elected in 2015, those who kept their seats thereafter, and others who are newly landed into the independence movement, have lived high on the hog, as the poverty attainment gap in education has failed to be adequately addressed, principally because we had a First Minister who required the writing of the policy on addressing the poverty-related attainment gap and didn't realise that there was a clue there, and the way to address it was to address poverty, which is signally, the SNP has signally failed to do. They have the Scottish Child Payment that Alec Neil recommended be introduced the best part of 10 years before it was. Again, because Sturgeon wouldn't listen to people that knew better than she did. And John Swinney is exactly the same. And the voters, to get your point about Barrhead, the voters have cottoned on that the SNP no longer does what it says on the tin. It does not prioritise independence. It prioritises party before country. But there is a road back. And the road back is, as others have already covered, and we do this every week, it is to sit down and speak honestly and wholeheartedly and comprehensively from the heart about why Scotland needs independence and why Scotland will not survive without independence. Brexit shafted Scotland. Coming out of the European Union has been a bad move in terms of our economy, but we ought to be able to trade at least as a member of EFTA. The SNP policy is independence within the EU. It is a non-starter. Free ports and SEZs see about that. There are a multitude of areas where the SNP's gone wrong, but at the moment, Scotland is not yet a desert and there is time to recover. But we can recover only, and if only, the SNP get together with the other leaders of other parties and movements and civic leaders and create a plan to do two things. One, to attain independence, and two, for our country's rebirth, so that we build the state, we talk about statehood, and we rebuild or build from scratch the institutions that Scotland will need to recover from hundreds of years of decay and the impact of colonialism. All you have to do, and I know we'll come to this shortly, Roddy, but just to touch on it slightly, all you have to do to look at Westminster's priorities is to consider the prospects for the people of Grangemouth and the surrounding areas, and the very fact that Westminster has not yet lifted a finger either to keep that refinery open, whilst English refineries expand on the back of importing and processing Scotland's oil, Scotland's resources, but the people of Scotland do without. Our energy prices rise, our unemployment figures rise, our bairns at school are not getting the education they should be getting, and our NHS and our social care service require immediate and absolute complete revamping, all of which we can do when we control our own resources and when we're governed by people in touch with the people of this country. And the SNP, unfortunately, for now, mainly are not.
And sadly, that is true. I go back to this, Lloyd, that, 40-odd% Labour got. Down south and in the recent opinion polls, we're struggling to get up to 20%. They look as if they're going to be wiped out to the next general election. Now, this, they get 40-odd% in Scotland. Now, John's plan to have 50% plus of the vote, when the people of Barrhead, Neilston, and and Uplemure, my old favourite place, the Labour Party, who's lied about taxes, they lied about supporting the waspy women, they lied about Grangemouth, they lied about supporting the disabled people, they lied about giving us freedom of speech, they lied about creating transparency in government, they lied about protecting the winter fuel payment, they lied about keeping council tax bill down, they lied about not raising taxes and NIC, etc. They lied about keeping food prices, they lied about reducing our energy bills, and yet they also lie about a genocide. There's not a genocide. And yet they slaughter the SNP in a by-election in what is SNP independence heartlands. It's diabolical, Lloyd.
It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, Roddy, but it shows. If the SNP was the professional campaigning organisation that it was 10 years ago, then the first thing that would have happened in the morning after the by-election in Barrhead and Uplemure would have been to sit down and say, what are we doing wrong? How come notionally we held this seat? How come the Labour Party has come from a dark place to a place of victory? It would be internal soul searching. But that would have been true for every single one of the by-elections that's happened in local government over the past, 5, 6, 7, 8 years even. As the support for the SNP reduces and then is actually confirmed by their vote in a local government by-election, then you analyse what's happening. You take the remedial action required to halt that collapse. Now, absolutely nothing that has happened since. Let's be kind for a second. Absolutely nothing that has happened post-COVID to the SNP shows that they have any form of analysis whatsoever of the fall in their own fortunes. The fact that the SNP is now there is a gap between the SNP and support for independence that is in double figures. In fact, probably 22-24% in reality. So that's 24% of the people who voted to send Phil and Philippa Whitford and Joanna Cherry and numerous others in 2015 to the Houses of Parliament, when we won all but 3 of the constituencies in Scotland. Those people are not voting for the SNP anymore. First question for a political party, why are our voters not voting for us? What is it that we're doing wrong? None of that analysis has happened. And the primary reason that it has not happened is because the people at the top of the SNP don't have the intellectual capability to address the question. Never mind address the actual answers to the questions. Now, when you have divisive policies and you drive away your own voters, I would suggest in this, and Roddy, Barrhead a damn sight better than I do, a lot of those voters who were SNP have clearly gone back to Labour. Now, that can be, when you actually look at the figures, that can be the only conclusion you can come to. Now, what greater indictment of the Scottish National Party after the list of failures of the Labour Party that you just enunciated, what greater indictment of the SNP can there be than the fact that people you had moved from Labour under Alex Salmond's leadership have now gone racing back to the Labour Party that is failing under Keir Starmer? Now, to me, it's incredible. But then again, I look at I look at some of the people who consider themselves to be senior in the Scottish National Party, who have little or no hinterland beyond a life in the world of academia, and then working for a political party and then becoming elected. This is an absolute highway to hell when you have people with little or no connection, because all they do is they feel the need, as John Swinney does all the time, to protect the party, defend the party, even when all the evidence in front of you tells you that the party is failing. The party before country approach is not only entirely and completely debilitating for the independence movement, but what I don't understand is how the leaders of the Scottish National Party, who have been over those ups and downs over the years, they can't see that this is damaging the party. Or are we back to something that we discussed on this programme on a number of occasions, but particularly over a year ago? Is this about managed decline? Is this really what's going on? Because, we know there's going to be no Tory revival. So that means that John in Perthshire and Highland Perthshire will be perfectly safe at next year's election because the Labour Party is not coming chasing for him. Is this what's happening to the Scottish National Party? Is this the level of cynicism, or is it just, as I believe it to be, it's just a total lack of intellectual ability, a lack of ability to analyse and see what is required? Because if you were genuinely still the Scottish National Party first line, our purpose, the achievement of national sovereignty for our country, then surely in all circumstances, never mind these circumstances when you are plummeting in the polls and plummeting in the votes, you would be talking to every element of the national movement to drive us forward to a position that where we nearly achieved our independence in 2014. If all indications are telling you that the vast majority of the people, given the opportunity to vote for independence, would do that, and we would become an independent country, then why and to what purpose will the Scottish National Party not speak to the broader movement? It does not stand up to any form of analysis whatsoever, other than the analysis of cynicism and managed decline.
Yeah, it's quite frightening, and you're right. I do know that area. And what annoys me is that from when I went into that constituency actually in 1991, the state we were in, and we built it up till we got rid of a Secretary of State for Scotland, a Labour stalwart, Jim Murphy, by hard work, graft, and we did it. And it's all been thrown away to what? To put men in frocks and in women's toilets? Really? Is that where it's gone? But here's the thing, Phil. As Lloyd and Eve have quite alluded to, I mean, everyone, and in business, you know as well as I do, is if something's going wrong, but you look at what's causing why are we losing customers? Well, if you want to view their membership as customers, they've lost more than half their customers. So they've lost us all this revenue. Your board would be sitting going, what have we done? We need to change to get the customers back, to get the revenue back up. They're living, though, in a wee bubble. Is it managed decline, as Lloyd alludes to? Is it stupidity? Is it pig-headedness? What is it that's making them not see that they need to change direction?
Doing what they're told, basically. The claws are into this leadership. The British state pulls the strings on the current leadership of the SNP. It's not hard to figure out when it's the big secret that I mightn't be non-binary. Nicola, is that right? We know some of the issues that she had when she left her previous job. We know people who know some of the things that we believe. I certainly believe the three issues that I know about that the British state can sue, could take Nicola down on. She'll do what she's told, or she'll be destroyed. And that's how the Brits work. You get a puppet in place because you get something on them, then you control them. You don't just shoot them all down, because eventually what you want is someone in a position to pretend to do what they say they're supposed to do, which is independence, but in fact they're actually working for you. They'll do what you say. They have not moved towards independence since Nicola was given those golden keys. So it's simple as this: self-interest, their little careers matter. She mentioned something like in 20 years, Britain will cease to exist. Well, we can't wait. People in poverty can't wait. We don't want to wait, Nicola. And you're supposed to represent us and your wee tribe, your wee cabal of people who are controlled, and they all control each other. John's get dirt on half the all of the cabinet. It's just how it works. It's the dark arts in politics. And you look at this, you look at that Barrhead Lebo side and Uplamore by-election. This shows the mess that he's in. Reform, get 1,018. Just narrowly behind SNP. And if you add the SNP and the Greens, Labour still getting the win. And that's the other thing I think that really needs to be understood. We've talked about the Haunt, but we should understand what it is and why it's a stitch-up. And there's an article in the Herald, the National, by my old friend George Caravan, which I'll paraphrase from. So Joseph de Haunt, a Belgian, invented this, and this will determine Scotland's constitutional future. It's proportional representation, and it's basically there's two general approaches you can take. You can the two mainstream approaches to proportional representation are single transferable vote and what we now call the Haunt. Okay, and STV is used in Scottish local elections. That's what was done there. And George used an analogy that works well. He states seat allocation works like a set of champagne glasses stacked in a pyramid. And when the candidate's glass is full, i.e. reaches full quota votes, their overflow or unused quota cascades to other contenders, and it means your vote counts. Every vote absolutely counts if you get selection on STV. But it's different from the Haunt because it focuses on the individual candidate. Okay? So the most important thing, it's been rejected everywhere else, but it's put in Scotland in summary because it effectively prohibits a majority government being elected. And something that Allan said earlier, even Alex said, well, we got really lucky there. It'll almost certainly never be done again because the system is designed to ensure that Scotland stays in the Union, and John continues with this failed strategy. It's a shambles.
I should just say, carry on, Barrhead. Back in 2016, my pal John and I were talking. Right after the 2016 election, he said to me, "Wee man, we need to start a second party, the Barrhead Independence Party, because you cannot win in a majority with one party." Now, doing that back in 2016, it's what led to eventually to Indy for Indy. But it's still the case that John's still ploughing a lone furrow, Allan. And it's just not going to work. That by-election shows he's got no chance. He's conning the people.
He's not. And, I mean, it looks like a good result for Labour, 40%. But the turnout, yet again, was very low. People are not coming out to vote for the political parties because they just do not trust them. And that is the biggest problem we have got. Now, the SNP had a clear run in this election. But the problem was the voters had no alternative to vote for if they were independents, because the Greens are not an independent party.
No.
They are, I mean, they're just a waste of space, should be scrubbed from the earth. But the SNP do need to rely on other parties. And for those people who say that standing against the SNP splits the vote, well, actually it doesn't. Because what this is showing is it gives those who are definitely not going to vote for the SNP an alternative to vote for, because they're showing that just now they are quite prepared to sit on their hands in their house and allow the unionists to get in. We need to have people in place for the voters to have a choice. Now, the SNP are actually the ones who are splitting votes just now, because the election results, over the past few months, are shown quite clearly. They have lost the support of the entire Yes movement. Less than half the movement are coming out to vote for the SNP now. Now, in 2026, if you think that's going to change, you're living in cloud cuckoo land. The people of Scotland will not vote for amateurs. They will not vote for pretenders. That is why it is essential to have candidates such as Liberate Scotland standing at these elections to give people the choice, because we need every single independence vote out so as that it counts. If you're sitting in the house doing nothing and voting for no one, then it only helps one organisation, and that's the Unionists. We have to make sure every single one of our supporters, and I'm not saying Liberate Scotland supporters, I'm not saying SNP supporters, I'm saying independent supporters, comes out and casts their vote for independence. That is essential in 2026. Otherwise, just pack up your bags now and sing Rule Britannia. Because if you're not prepared to do a simple thing like that, you deserve everything you bloody get.
We have for years, Eva, been talking about a constitutional convention to bring people in. And then suddenly, John mentioned something about it later on. We have reinvigorated the independence, nothing less. And suddenly, a lot of SNP people and other commentators are grabbing the independence, nothing else. And this week, there was another one. Our Allan there, along with Colette at ISP, have been working on an oath of allegiance to do away with the one to the monarch of England. And suddenly, would you believe it, the SNP have decided they want to have an oath of allegiance and drop the Hollywood oath to Charles and come out with one of our own. It's caused a bit of a stir, this, just now. But again, it shows that the things that we talk about, Eva, are, work with the people.
It's not just that they work with the people, it's the SNP representatives and SNP advisors watch Prism. So hello again.
Hello.
You're welcome to appear here anytime. It would be a particular joy for me if Keith Brown came on, and I know, Roddy, you would love for John Swinney to attend. So there would be guaranteed a very warm welcome of Pete's welcome every day of the week and twice on a Sunday. Yeah, the thing about this oath is that Allan and Colette have been working on this for a long time. They drew it to the attention of Angus Robertson, and in essence, he said, oh no, you can't do that. And all of a sudden, it's been decided that maybe after all, you can. So I hope that Colette and Allan get the publicity and the thanks and the gratitude that they deserve for flagging this up long before Kevin Stewart or anybody else in the SNP did. Because, it's one thing to steal somebody else's idea, but it's another to pretend that it's your own. Well, he can't say that now. He kens now because it's all over social media that it was Colette and Allan who did it first. But, the other things that we do first on Prism isn't because there's anything special about any of us. It's because we listen to what the people want, and we look at history, and we learn from history, and we do postmortems like Lloyd spoke about earlier, that the SNP should have been doing after every election that they got gubbed in, as well as every election that they won in, because you have to learn from your successes and you have to learn from your mistakes. And the people of Scotland need to regard history very, very closely, and not just hear the sound bites, and interpret what it is and use a comprehensive ear to interpret what it is that politicians actually say, not what you think they say. Because in that regard, she who shall remain nameless was very good at the grand reveal, and then this was followed up by a press release where there was confirmation of something that she had promised to deliver, when in fact she was promising to promise to deliver. And John Swinney's no different. He's trying to perfect that art too. So when he says we're going to deliver democracy and we're planning to deliver independence and we're going to have a constitutional convention, he needs to be pinned down. The constitutional convention should be happening now, before the election. The convention and the talks and the powwows should be happening from now until the election campaign is underway, so that next year is in fact an independence election. And there are those within the movement who say, well, Holyrood doesn't have that power. Holyrood is simply a creation of Westminster. Holyrood is subservient to Westminster. If there's a supermajority of the popular vote and a supermajority of MSPs in Holyrood, that doesn't matter internationally. You can bet your bottom dollar it matters internationally. It's why the unionists and those in hock to the unionists are telling you that it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Think for yourselves, people of Scotland. Do you seriously believe that if there was a vast majority of independent supporting MSPs in Holyrood, that the world would fail to report it, that they would fail to pay attention? The outcome is massively important because it's an electoral event. And if you run under the strapline of independence, nothing less, there can be no doubt that your vote was cast for independence, nothing less. So we need that electoral event run democratically, openly, on a strategic line of independence, nothing less. We need popular support, we need international support, and we need domestic and international legitimacy, as John Swinney referred to. But you get domestic and international legitimacy when you've got majorities. The SNP ain't going to get a majority of the popular vote. They ain't going to get a majority of the seats either. But collectively, as a movement, we can and we will achieve both of these objectives, provided that the correct level of commitment is there from the people in the positions of power that can mobilise the resources, the greatest of which is our people, when they have hope and optimism that we will in fact deliver.
Here. Time's running against us, so I want to cram a few things in, Lloyd. But one, the fact that we are reasons for independence. One, we're forced to take an oath to a foreign king. Because let's be just clear, ladies and gentlemen, there has been no monarch of Scots since 1714 when Queen Anne died. None of them have taken the oath to Scotland. They've only been kings of England and queens of England. Remember that. And we're forced to take an oath to them. That's one thing. But Craig Murray, a good friend of our show and a good guy, pointed this out today, that Scotland, who people don't think we're a colony, it's a judge in the High Court of England and Wales, which does not reference Scots law and has no jurisdiction in Scotland or Northern Ireland, will hear the judicial review on the prescription of the Palestine action in the UK. Now, never mind your position in that, Lloyd, but the fact that a High Court judge in England who has no jurisdiction here in Scotland can make a ruling that affects us is just yet another reason why we need to get out of this union.
Absolutely, Roddy, but I'd be interested to hear what Craig's got to say about the murmurings from that oaf Kevin Stewart with regard to the the oaths taken. What Kevin Stewart fails to understand is Grenada is an independent country, member of the Commonwealth. It still has an attachment to the UK by dint of the fact that it accepted when it joined the Commonwealth that the Supreme Court in England would be the final court of arbitration for them. Now, what Kevin Stewart fails to understand is that what Grenada wants to do is it wants to remove an oath, and it wants to remove itself from exactly that legal position of having its Supreme Court sitting in London. Why does it want to do that? Because it's an independent country, Kevin. It's a whole different guff from what you're talking about with regard to taking the oath in Parliament. And I have to, a big shout out to Colette Walker and to Allan Petrie for their attempt to get the oath changed, because they've been in not only were they were rejected effectively by Angus BBC Scotland Robertson, but they also have been in dialogue with the Speaker of the House of Commons and have rattled the cages of the House of Commons by this initiative, and they should be congratulated for that. Now, as to the Supreme Court, we rolled over and prepared and let our belly be tickled, and it was partly the fact that for a long time the SNP position was that we would be an independent country within the Commonwealth. And that, by dint of that statement, we effectively gave up our right not to be part of the Supreme Court. But I think also there were certain members of the Scottish National Party saw the Supreme Court as a great way of taking us off the path to independence, primarily by Nicola Sturgeon's appeal to the Supreme Court on the issue of the Section 30. Now, in real terms, what she did there, and it's something that which not many people seem to pay an awful lot of attention to, she effectively shut down the route that John Swinney is telling us will reopen next year if everybody votes for the SNP. He's already been told the judges have made their decision. Now, let's hope that next time Colin Mackay, good guy Colin Mackay, or maybe it'll be better if it's my old mate Martin Geisler, the next time they speak to John about that, let them just ask him the question on that. Well, why in that case? Because remember, he was the Deputy First Minister when they made the decision to go to the Supreme Court and get the ruling against the policy he intends to bring forward in May of next year. As I said, The SNP leadership is an intellectual desert.
Yeah, and you're being just polite about them. You're being unkind to intellectual deserts. Phil, those matters of Kevin Stewart, stealing one of our ideas, but not even stealing it very well, and the point that an English High Court judge will rule out. But here's another reason, which I'll come back to Eve on as well, because this week it became official. We knew it was going to happen, but they officially took over Liberty Steel and the Yorkshire plant to protect 1,450 jobs in Scunthorpe. Of course, they didn't take over the plant in Port Talbot to save any Welsh jobs, and they certainly didn't save Grangemouth. All these reasons why we need to get out.
Absolutely. Grangemouth no more, Port Talbot no more. It just continues, and it's horrific. But the British government will take control of part of Liberty Steel. Now, it's owned by commodities tycoon Sanjeev Gupta, Indian-born, after the business was placed into liquidation following a petition from its creditors recently. And the High Court a judge at the High Court approved the petition for Yorkshire-based Specialty Steel UK, it's the third largest, I think, to be placed into compulsory liquidation, describing the business as hopelessly insolvent, right? And this is them stepping in, and this is again, Labour lied again about that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a private company in Grangemouth. We can't step in. Well, what's happening down here? Well, when it matters to them, they're moving everything south. They're asset stripping, everything. The corporations that really run the shots, that call the shots and really control the government, these so-called elite parasites, they're absolutely stripping what's left of the wealth of this big Great Britain, so-called Great Britain, and the people are suffering. And this is a little bit of a show to pretend to the people of England that at least they still care about them. They've stopped giving a damn. They don't care what Scotland says or what Wales says or what we vote for, because in the big pictures, as you'll see in the very first page or one of the early pages of the Reverend's little blue book, it shows us that Scotland's opinion and vote in general elections generally doesn't matter other than two tiny little incidents. We don't count, and everybody knows it, and it's about time we get out of this and stood on our own 2 feet.
Yeah. Allan, this topic of the oath, I obviously have to pass over to you for all the hard work and research you put into it.
Well, what's that saying? It's not for honours, nor glory or riches that we fight, but for freedom itself. I don't care, and I don't believe Colette cares who takes this up as long as we win this argument. But he's using the wrong argument. The fact is, the oath that is put in place just now breaches the Equality Act, because republicanism is a protected characteristic of the Equality Act. It is also an issue that Northern Ireland do not have to say the oath to the monarchy. They say an oath to the people of Ireland. And that is what we should be doing in Scotland. But, for the English courts to rule on anything in Scotland, it's just pathetic. They're trying to say we're not a colony. Well, what other independent nation actually has a foreign court where you've got, a foreign king you've got to pledge allegiance to, governed by a foreign bloody court? It's that bad. Last week in Glasgow, there was a man detained by the police for wearing a T-shirt that said, Plasticine action. My God, I thought Morph had just gone off the air. Morph in flipping Wallace and Gromit. It turns out they're probably in Guantanamo Bay, getting questioned by the Americans for their terrorist activity. For God's sake, what kind of country are we living in now, where plasticine action on a T-shirt is seen as a criminal offence? Are they totally stupid? This is why we need. Yes. This is why we need independence for Scotland. Now, next year, there's going to be another couple of parties in place. There's going to be the Corbyn party, and there's going to be the George Galloway party. Now, people should remember, if you're thinking about voting for them as an attack on the SNP, to try and teach the SNP a lesson, remember, they are both English parties. They may say they support a referendum on independence, and that's the important thing, a referendum on independence. They're not supporting independence. But that referendum, just like in 2014, will be run by the British state and fixed as it was in 2014.
Yeah.
So you're not supporting independence by giving your votes to those individual parties. If you really want to hurt the SNP, give them a good slap, then vote Liberate Scotland. Because when you're voting Liberate Scotland, you're voting to liberate Scotland. And that's what we all want.
Here. But it's also your same accusation. John's doing the same, going for a Section 30. Well, that's what the SNP are doing, so they're every bit as guilty. And I'm afraid the clock's beating us, folks, as always. This conversation could probably go on for hours longer. Maybe we'll continue it next week. But I would just say to you, if you're inspired, Liberate Scotland have got a plan. And unlike the SNP or the Greens, we do have a plan for independence. When I say we, they have an independence plan. But it needs help. Not all the seats are covered. There's not candidates in every seat. There's not workers in every seat. You need to get involved. If you're serious about independence, doesn't matter how little you think you can do, get in touch with Liberate Scotland, with Indie for Indie, or ISP, or Sovereignty, or any of the other members of the group, and get involved. If you want independence, it ain't going to happen for other people. You have to get involved. So after my wee lecture, ladies, gentlemen, thank you. Folks at home, till we see you again, you and yours, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.